Hello, and welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is Real Leaders Overcoming Real Crap. In this episode, I had an awesome conversation with Will Dahlstrom. He shares a really unique perspective of being in that role of integrator. Many of you heard of the integrator role in EOS, and he has served in multiple companies in a role of translating a vision into a well-oiled, high-performing company. And he's got incredible insights, wisdom. We had a really fun conversation. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks for being here. All right. Well, Will, thank you again for joining me on the podcast. I'm really excited for our guests to hear about your experiences. So thanks for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
So catch them up on what we've already talked about as far as kind of the arc of your career and where you've been at more recently in these senior leadership roles and the uniqueness of your role.
Yeah. So my career's definitely seen a unique arc. So I spent, the first 10 years of my career in the military, honored to serve and leading some of best men and women I think our country has to offer. And then after I got out of the military, I lucked into a internal consulting role with a large manufacturing conglomerate, which is where I was really able to just sharpen my teeth on a lot of the things that you have no idea about in business, right? And so I did that for a number of years, and then lucked into just running my first businesses and organizations through what most people would consider a calamity, right? Where we made an acquisition, and the leader of the acquisition that we made decided to leave 2 weeks after it, right? And nobody knew what was going on. So like any great, hungry, lucky young individual, I got to jump in there and lead a business, right? And I think that's, where a lot of similar stories, right? Just
Mhm.
opportunity and luck come together and you get to just jam into it. So I started doing that. I ran a crowd and trailer business in Boston, which super unique first business because it's so highly regulated and
Mhm.
um, tough to figure out. So I did that, and then led into running a bunch of other manufacturing businesses across the country until I got to the point where in 2016 I decided I wanted to get on back to Austin, Texas with the family, and I went to work for my first private company. And that was a community impact newspaper here in Austin, Texas. And the thought of going from public to private, right? Tough jump, right? But it was the best move I ever made. And I have worked for private companies ever since. So worked for Community Impact Newspaper as their VP of manufacturing at first, and then we started to go down the EOS path. And in 2017, found EOS, and don't know what the leadership team was thinking, but they nominated me to be their integrator, and that's been my story ever since. So got to be their integrator and grew their COO, and then led the team. We led through the COVID experience and continued to grow. And then in 21, I went ahead and moved on over to run a nationwide personal injury law firm, uh, which was super fun as their integrator. And then from there, moved over and led a construction company in Florida, roofing and construction exterior services. Led that through an acquisition and integration, and now I work for a small independent fund here in the Austin area, um, operating a small collection of small businesses around the country.
So that's kind of a wild ride, Will. You not only were in pretty different sectors of going
Yeah,
from military to big public entities to little smaller private firms and companies, but also across all kinds of sectors, construction,
yeah.
manufacturing,
Media,
newspapers. Yeah.
advertising.
So, your value in these is you're able
Mhm.
to like you call it the integrator role for the Entrepreneur's Operating System, EOS. Most of us have heard of
Yeah,
it or read the book Traction at least to get a feel for it. And it's essentially like how do you make any group of people in any industry high performing? How do you set
Yeah.
SMART goals, reach them, and then align everyone around those? And you're the guy that makes that happen, the integrator, right? There's the vision and the goals, and then it's like you're the one who can come into any setting and go, okay, if we follow these principles and processes, we're going to be successful. It sounds like you've had a lot of success.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think the biggest thing to all that is team building, right? Right people in right seats
mhm.
and being there to remove the barriers,
Okay.
you know?
So, well, let's get into some of that then, because the common
Yeah,
denominator of your success has been right people, right seats, supported in the right way, basically, right? No matter
absolutely.
what the
Hands
business
down. Yeah.
is. So, what what were some like unexpected, really challenging obstacles that you faced when it comes to getting a group of people together, and
Mm.
helping them to really be high performing, truly?
Yeah. I think, you can look at any of the organizations. One of the hardest or toughest challenges, I think, stemmed with, just when I first started going down the EOS path, right? As a young integrator, not really knowing what the heck this role even was,
Mhm.
and how to really make it work. And then to be thrown into a situation like COVID, right?
Okay.
That was probably the toughest scenario I ever faced because we had really high performing people within the organization. They were all great. But the entrepreneurial operating system and really just the main tenets they teach is how do you get everybody to work together, right? And all row in the same direction. And most organizations, like everybody has their fiefdom or their niche, or, I'm a marketing person or I'm an operating person. And we don't really talk about that. And the cool thing about EOS is no, we all come together once a week and we all talk about our stuff and we all help each other get
Mhm.
through those issues or those scenarios or those tough conversations. So I think the toughest situation that I ever had was really just the first time that I had to do it. And I had to figure out how do you integrate people that are all really good at what they do and their expertise and help everybody see, like, yeah, but your expertise can be really beneficial to Will's expertise over here.
Mhm.
And you can help. So many times people think they can't help because they've just been operations for their whole career and they've never done marketing. But those skills are so valuable, and their lens and their insight and
Mhm.
what they've experienced over their 15, 20 years of career can solve a problem that, Meg, you may be having in the marketing side
Mhm.
so much more quickly than if they just stayed in their lanes. Right. And so that was the toughest thing for me, is just figuring out how the hell do you get people to work together without forcing it,
Okay.
you know?
Right. It's
So,
like
yeah,
when you try and tell little group of kids exactly what they should be doing, it doesn't work. And leadership is a lot
yeah,
like parenting, or so we've gotta
yeah.
create opportunity and environment and some
Love that.
expectation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So so COVID hits, you've got high performing people, you're trying to kind of redo the way everyone's working together by bringing EOS in. Can you give us an example of what some of the themes were of the challenges, the friction you hit, where you were just like, why is this so hard? Like some of that unexpected stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the unexpected stuff of people for so long, especially in privately held companies and companies that are mid-size, right? They're so used to just doing what they are good at,
Okay.
right? So not that they're not willing to help, but they're just used to doing what they're really good at.
Mhm.
And COVID just blew that up very quickly, right? Especially for Community Impact newspaper, which was a print first type of company,
Mhm.
and small business driven, and advertising was to restaurants and local businesses and stuff. What happened when COVID hit? All that stuff closed,
Mhm.
right? Well, very quickly, we had to change gears. And John Garrett is a visionary who's a genius. I mean, he's one of the smartest guys I've ever known. Um, he recognized that we had to shift gears
Mhm.
and we had to still get information out, but at a much quicker trend, right? We were a monthly, information news source, and news was changing so fast in that time that
Right.
we had to find a way to get it out another way, right? And so I think within like 72 hours, we flopped from being a print first to being what he claimed like a phygital driven organization. We were always going to be physical and print, but we had to have a digital piece too now, and we had to get it out to people very fast. So within 72 hours, we completely flopped all of our processes within the whole company to get daily newsletters and daily hourly information going onto the website and connecting with our local populace in a way that hadn't been before, right? Like
Right.
completely changed. Like the whole organization and its processes blew up and changed. And that was, I think, the first time where being an integrator really clicked to me. Like my job as an integrator isn't to sit there and tell people what to do. My job really isn't even to hold people accountable. Like I know a lot of people say that, but I don't view that. My job is to say, okay, here's the vision. Here's where we want to go. Great. How do I get us there? And how do I get people in the right seats and doing the right things that they're really good at and
Hmm.
motivate them to get there and then create an open environment to be like, yo, I'm here. What barriers do you have? I'm here to just remove those.
Hmm.
That's where it always clicked for me previously. Like as a leader, our job's to remove barriers, right? But it never really came in that mindset of like, no, 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 that's our only job.
Yeah.
It's the only reason we exist. And so as an integrator, like that was one of the toughest situations because before that, I think we all were starting to work together and, we were starting to kind of cross and collaborate. But when you get that much pressure to change that quickly in
Right.
an organization, it forces you to figure it out, right? And really collaborate and do things differently. So that ordeal of trying like really switching over all the processes and a lot of our go-to-market strategy and everything in like 72 hours, it it solidified so much for me of what the heck being an integrator is, right?
Yeah.
It's really to remove the barriers and allow people to succeed.
Sometimes those extreme situations are when we test what really works. Like I think that this is a good principle, guiding principle for me as a
Yeah.
leader, but it's like in that kind of environment, it's either going to go up in flames or succeed very quickly. You get very quick feedback.
And hopefully it doesn't go up in flames, but
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. But
absolutely.
but
Yeah.
to be fair, companies did go up in flames during that time. A lot of them didn't make it through that, right?
Yeah,
And
fair.
so you've got to look at I always say money covers incompetence. So you can be doing things not
That's
very well,
oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And you've got enough money coming in to cover it up, but then a true crisis hits. You really need a different go-to-market strategy, or you have a huge, massive change in your market or workforce, right?
Hmm.
Then that's the real test of how skilled are you, and are you using
Yeah.
approaches and systems that really work? So,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
let's talk about less dramatic environments where just the
Yeah.
norm of the grind, right? In
Yeah.
manufacturing or some of those settings where the culture really does eat strategy for breakfast sometimes, right? We can EOS, great strategy. And they
Yeah.
pay a lot of attention to culture because you can
Yeah.
have the best goals in the world. So what's been some of your experiences with culture really taking down what should have been a high performing team?
Mm.
Like really derailing people's efforts, slowing things down. It wasn't because of the goals and processes, it was because of how people were interacting.
Yeah. Um, so I'm going to keep this a little more general, right? Because I respect everybody I've ever worked with. The I think one of the biggest things about when you get into that mid-size
Hmm.
business world that I've noticed is when you're really small, you're under that $10 million range, right? You're just there serving your mission. You're still very missionally driven, like the mission why you started the company, the founder, super involved, like everybody that joined is really excited, right? And then once you kind of get bigger and you start to actually put some serious process to things, um, and you realize, oh, well, I need process to run this stuff, and we got to have goals. And oh, well, wait, the money starts to really matter. right? Because like I have all these bills and overhead, and I got to pay all these people and all these expenses, right? Like even if you want to stay super missionally driven as a private company, like that stuff starts to creep in. And I don't want to say it's toxic, right? Or it creates a toxic environment, but if you don't manage it right and deal with it right, it can really undercut all the good things that you're doing. So I guess what I'm, alluding to or to give some specificity to is I think that as an integrator, you have to realize the pressure that founders are under, especially when they really start to break into that mid-size or that no man's land of business. They're under a pressure that nobody else in the organization can understand. They
Mm-hmm.
have personal guarantees that are exorbitant, right? They're moving from this lens of, oh, well, everything's going great and I can pay everything to like, oh man, if 1 month goes bad,
Right.
I'm going to be hurting.
Mm-hmm.
And they're carrying all that pressure. They're not sharing it or pushing it off anywhere. And it really is, I think there's a unique thing that changes when you move from just being a small, super small business to actually be considered that mid-size. You make it through, right? And you're there. Like founders don't know how to offload that pressure yet.
Hmm. Okay.
They're still used to just, it's just me. I have to carry it. And so that cultural divide,
Mm-hmm.
right, of when a true integrator comes in to help a visionary is really having to understand like they're carrying all this pressure behind the scenes, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that pressure can come out in ways that can, no matter what we're trying to do in the organization, that can be great. We're people first, we have goals, we have processes, we're driving success, we're missionally driven. Like that pressure is real,
Yeah.
and it can sometimes rear its ugly head in a way that can really just chop through very quickly
Right.
months of work,
I
right?
know.
And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But I think that's the biggest thing. Like so many times people just don't want to step back and realize the pressure that founders and entrepreneurs are under. It's so immense.
Right. And we have all seen when someone who's a founder, president, CEO cracks under that pressure and does things that are not optimal. So
Yeah.
when someone on the front lines gets really stressed out and does something that's not optimal, not many people see it. But when you're the chief, everyone sees your bad behavior,
Yeah.
right? And they
Yeah.
don't understand the pressure that it came from. They don't have the
Hmm.
visibility into the
Hmm.
issues and the
Hmm.
stressors that you have. And we've all seen that where those moments where you realize the emperor has no clothes, like no one's giving them feedback. They're acting amok and they don't realize, they don't even identify um, the way that they're being perceived by other people and that they are under immense pressure. And so you've definitely seen that happen and seen how that can erode trust.
Yeah, and I think that's really the biggest thing, right? As you're growing, that as an integrator, you got to step into that void and you
Mhm.
got to provide guidance, right? And it took me a long time to realize, and as I've talked to so many founders and worked with so many integrators, to help them better communicate, like communication's everything. You know, that can quickly erode the culture if you don't
Mhm.
control the communication,
Mhm.
right?
And you've got to
As an
be
integrator.
proactive about it. It's funny, I sometimes hear leaders say, like, I've learned I need to over communicate. There's really not over communicating. Like, really be thoughtful and have two-way communication a lot and make sure you're
Mhm.
thinking intentionally about what information people need and what you need to hear from them
That's
and
so
be
true.
proactive about it. So,
That's so true. Yeah. One of the things just on the same note with communication that always makes me laugh is I forget a leader once told me that you only know you're communicating well when you feel like you're being annoying.
yeah, exactly.
And it's always stuck with me, right? And so I think the common denominator is like, yeah, there isn't anything like over communication and stuff, but for leaders, we all get so busy,
Hmm.
right? There's always so much on a founder's plate or a integrator's plate or even a C-suite or a middle manager. Like everybody's so busy. And so I always try to remind myself, like, have I been annoying today? Like, have I truly been an annoying in my head? Because if I haven't, then somebody out there is probably saying, "What in the world is going on?"
Yeah, someone's
You
probably in
know?
a void, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So, so we talk a lot about leadership in generic terms, but let's just talk about bosses. We can all identify with the concept of the boss and the boss's boss, right?
yeah,
And usually what derails bosses is when they get stressed out. They're not aware of their how they're affecting other people. They're not being proactive or thoughtful. They're just
yeah.
feeling that pressure, just like that founder, right? But so do
Mhm.
frontline managers.
Absolutely,
So,
right. Yeah.
what have you seen at, well, first of all, what do you think, how do you know when you're a bad boss? What are those behaviors? What does it look like? And what have you done to support people that are being bad bosses?
I mean, I think we've all been a bad boss at one time or another, right? Like, I mean, I remember one of the most. I'll get a little open here. What I, you always think you're great, right? Like naturally, like, okay, I'm doing a great job and everything's going good, right? But um, I remember a few years back, I won't say how many, I one of my employees that I had, we had to do some changes and they left the organization, right? And this was time when Glassdoor was just really getting up and going, right? And they left a review,
Oh
and
no.
it was a harsh review.
Yeah.
And I've always read all the exit surveys, right? Always, it's always, no matter how big the company was, no matter how it was, like I always read exit surveys. I think it's such an important thing
Mhm.
that you as a leader can do because it's going to show you where the weak spots of the organization is and where the great spots of the
Mhm.
organization are. And, where do you double down and where do you lean in for improvement? And hey, how can I get better as a leader, right? At the end of the day, it all falls on me as a leader. How are we doing, right? Well, they wrote this really truthful review in their eyes. And when I saw it there it was so interesting because the exit interview didn't align with the review that was left
Mhm.
on Glassdoor. But I always read all the Glassdoor reviews too that came in, and I just always believed in that. Like there's truth in everything,
Mhm.
everything. But this one cut deep, right? It was the first time my name had been mentioned in a review that was very, very rough.
Mhm.
And it hit me like just like a freight train. And I went, oh my God, this is not leadership. What am I doing? Right. And I realized that I was so caught up in hitting the goals, in hitting the metrics, in managing the organization, right? That I had forgot to lead.
Yeah.
And it changed that one point. Everybody has their pivot point. That point changed my mentality on leadership. Listen, management's important. You have to manage. I manage every day. You have to manage, right? But you don't manage at the risk of overpowering that you're a leader and you lead people.
Right.
And it just, I mean, it's such a change. Like sometimes you got to say, hey, it's okay that we miss this metric,
Mhm.
right? Because Will is super stressed out. I need to step in as leader and figure out why and figure
Mhm.
out how do I remove the barriers in their way so that they can be successful. Because Will wouldn't be here on the team if they weren't
Right.
aligned with our core values and they got it and they wanted,
Yeah.
they had the capacity to do it and they're supposed to be here. So that means that me as a leader, I'm failing in some way
Right.
to not remove the barriers that are affecting.
I
So
think,
I don't know
you
if that
know,
answers the question or not.
all of us have had those moments of feedback as a leader of like where you realize, oh, this is how I'm being perceived.
Yeah.
And usually the biggest mistakes that we make is when we're over focused on the goals and outcomes. That's usually
Right.
a little indicator of like I'm getting really focused and stressed out about the goals and the what we're supposed to be doing. That's all I'm talking about, and I'm getting stressed about it. And I'm not actually paying attention to the people, how they're doing, how things are going.
Yeah.
and why we do what we do. Are people still feeling connected to the why? Are they
Yeah.
motivated? Are
Yeah.
they supported? Are they working together well? Do they have trust in me? Do I have trust in them? And we get overly focused on the what and we forget about the how and the
Mm.
why. And that's where most
Yeah.
mistakes come from.
Yeah. So true. So true.
And we need that feedback to remember, like, oh, yeah, I'm overly focused here, and that is not what people need. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
when you look at those little indicators of healthy culture and healthy leadership, where I'm not overly focused on managing stuff and on the what, but I have
Yeah.
a good
Yeah.
like balanced perspective. What are your top indicators of like if you popped into a company, what are you going to be looking for to see they're healthy? If these
Mm.
one or two things are in place, I'd say they're healthy.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting. Um, I think I kind of trim back to say like, okay, I think every organization, everybody needs to know the vision and needs to know where they're going.
Mhm.
Um, Period. End of story. Right. And then every organization needs to have cadence.
Mhm.
I don't care the size you are, you have to have cadence. Um, then I think there's a third thing in there. I know you said two, but the third thing is like, can they solve issues? Can they talk? Right.
Okay.
You know, and so like vision is super important. Vision, can people have a lot of different definitions of it, but for me, it's just simple. Like, do people know like where they're going, both long term and near term? Because if the whole organization doesn't know like where the hell do we want to go in 5 or 10 years, like what's
Mhm.
that big hairy audacious goal, and then where the hell do we want to be in like a quarter, 1, 3 years? If people don't, they don't have to know it by heart, but they have to know generally like
Mhm.
here's where we're going, here's what we're focused on.
Yeah.
If they don't, then I think it's going to be very hard for you to
Yeah.
even begin to be successful. And then the second thing is cadence. I think that word meetings are a dirty word, right? They become like, oh, we don't want meetings. Meetings are bad. But cadence is so much more than just meetings. Meetings are just the simplest way to institute cadence in an organization. Cadence, beating the drum. There's a reason why when people are rowing a ship, they beat a drum, right? Like go back centuries, right? It's not something new, right? The reason why in the army, when we march, we sing a cadence, right? It keeps us all in step. It keeps us moving in the same direction. It keeps us flowing, right? So if you go into an organization, I see like, I think, okay, what's your cadence? Like how, when do you meet? When do you do reports? Like
Mhm.
when do you talk? Like, what do you do? And they're like, well, uh, we kind of meet every week. Well, right then and there, there's a lot of opportunity just by instituting some cadence. Right.
Mhm.
And then the third thing is you got to solve issues, right? Like so many times people are afraid to mention the hard stuff. And a lot of it comes from the fact that leaders aren't doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is remove the barriers.
Mhm.
If we're there to remove the barriers and listen and actually do that, then the issues are going to get brought up because you as a leader are doing what you need to do to remove the barriers, right? And so those three things, I think, really allow you to see in any organization that I've gone into and that I've helped um, see where the opportunities are.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that it's not rocket science, but for some reason it does take us a long time to figure this stuff out. That, like, if
Yeah.
I just think about jobs that I didn't like, it's
Hmm.
one, it's because I didn't even know where we were going and how I contributed to that. I didn't feel any pull towards something.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
two, I wasn't sure if we were winning or not and if we were making momentum. That's the cadence, right? How
Right.
am I
Right.
tracking that we're actually doing what we said we were going to do?
Hmm.
Right. And I need to know
Hmm.
that. I want that feedback, but I want to know I'm achieving something. Right. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
third is like how do we deal with problems and
Hmm.
how are we fixing things and working together? And a
Yeah.
lot of people get really disengaged from a job when they're like, no one's talking about the conflict. There's this problem festering here and no one's dealing with it or we're not dealing with it well.
Right.
Very frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not deal with things well. I think that's the misnomer, right? Like so many leaders like, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to look like I don't know. Or, but it's okay, at least in my experience. Like I've always respected people and leaders that are like, they may not solve the problem completely, but
Mhm.
like they listened, they heard, and they stepped in and said, okay, hey, well, we can do this,
Yeah,
right? I don't know if we can solve all of it right now, but we can do this and let's come back to it later. Like that, I respect that. Like, oh, cool, you
right.
listened to me. Like we made progress. Like, holy crap, that's awesome, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's the biggest misnomer solving issues. Like everybody says, hey, we got to solve an issue, we got to put it to bed. It has to be solved forever. I struggle with that one. Like solving an issue forever. Like if you're in a growing organization, you may solve this issue the best you can for 6 months, but you know what? It's going to be a brand new, different looking issue in
yeah.
6 months. It ain't going
It's
to be
going to
red
come
anymore. It's
up
going
in
to
a
be blue,
different,
right?
yeah,
Like,
it's going to come up
you
in a
know,
different iteration because if you're growing and evolving, then your problems are going to grow and evolve and be different too. So the
yeah.
problems will always be there
Good enough is sometimes okay, you know?
to move forward. We're going to get it as
Right,
good as we
exactly.
can and move forward.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you know?
yeah. And that's, I think what you're describing is just kind of that new paradigm of leadership where I don't have to have all the answers. I'm not going to be rigid and overly focused on the goals. It's that more balanced approach, acknowledging like, this is just the way people are, this is the way business works, and let's roll with
Yeah,
that in a way that's compassionate.
yeah, yeah. I like that compassion, right? And I mean, shoot, I fail a lot, right? Like I get so driven too, and I got to catch myself all the time. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Human nature. Right.
yeah, right.
So, Will, any parting wisdom you would share with leaders who are not in the visionary seat, the idea seat? They're more in that seat of like, okay, it's up to me to figure out good ways to align people to get things done. What,
Mm.
because a lot of leaders are in roles like that, right? Where
Yeah,
we're coming in and creating an environment and systems and supporting people. So, what would be something that you wish you would have heard 15 years ago in that role?
keep things simple first, right? Always keep it simple. If it takes you more than a couple of minutes as a leader to explain, it's probably too complicated, right? That would be the first thing. The second thing that I would say from an execution standpoint is know your playbook as a leader, right? Like know where your every individual who has the honor to lead and manage a team has strengths. And you want to lean into your strengths, right? My strengths are totally different from your strengths, right, Meg? We may overlap some, but you're going to be really strong in some areas that I am super weak in.
Mhm.
And so don't prescribe to a playbook as a leader that feels disingenuine to you. So I would say first figure out like what's your playbook, what are your strengths, and lead with those strengths in what you do to gain traction and control and put your organization, your team in a position where you can remove the barriers for them, right?
Mhm.
Lead with where you're comfort, but make sure you write it down. Like, here's how I come into an organization, and here are my strengths that I'm
Mhm.
going to lead into. Because if you lead in with your strengths, you're going to gain trust a lot faster. Because you lead into your strengths, you're going to remove a lot more barriers. If you follow some playbook because this is what this book said you have to do, those first two things that it says to do may be really uncomfortable for you, and you're not going to be able to have the impact on your team and remove the barriers that are in their way as quickly as you could if you lead in to your strengths. So that would be my recommendation, right?
Love it.
For anybody, right? Keep it
Yeah,
simple, keep it simple all the time, and then really understand your playbook and your strengths.
brilliant. Well, thanks so much. I wish I personally
Yeah,
would have heard all of that. I can think of 20 mistakes I made when I didn't listen to that advice. So, thank you again for taking time to share your wisdom with
absolutely.
us.
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Meg. Appreciate it.